Good morning, Patricia.
Good morning. I hope you're all well and healthy.
Well, thank you very much indeed. That's an incredibly lovely and positive start. How is life with you? How have you been dealing with the whole sort of lockdown thing?
Well, I'm Brazilian, so this lockdown defies all the cultural norms of Brazilian, and we have very low, appreciation of social distancing. So I think I've learned something new in the past months of being away is also important. So other forms of getting together have been a new must in my agenda.
So the healthcare industry and consumer health has been in the spotlight during the last 12 months, not typically regarded as the most creative sector due to regulations, etc., that sort of thing. Do you think this perception has changed in the last 12 months?
Yes, I think, and I hope many other people think the same. More than ever, because of COVID, I think the consumers ourselves, we start treating our health in a much more active versus passive way. And creativity, it's a clear way to get consumers to engage with our message, if it's either educational, if it is support, or really just opening the minds of consumer what's available out there for them to take better care of their health. And this is something that in the past was not in the front of the thinking from the health industry. The health industry is always, you talked about regulations, you're absolutely correct, but also science has always been the thing that was the most important one. Science keeps being something that is extremely important, and breaking down the science in a very friendly way to our consumer is the job that all of us in the health industry need to do right now.
And do you mind if before we sort of, we're going to talk about kind of creativity, we're going to talk about your role and how you're trying to embed it in the culture and that sort of thing. But I wonder if we could start at the top and sort of work out a little bit. What would an ideal or a really good consumer experience be for Bayer? What would that look like?
So, well, we have many products, so this is a complex question. Let me just take one example. So there is an unmet need. Let me use Bepanthen as a brand, that I have here with me next to my computer. So I have seen, I have really dry skin, I'm suffering, and there is nothing that has really helped me in the past. So as a consumer, I'm looking for products that can really solve that issue. And the way to do that normally, between you and I, the first thing that we do, it's either we talk to our doctors, but now with COVID, nobody wants to go to a doctor office unless it's really needed, or to a hospital unless it's really needed. So what we do Dr. Google, right? So we just put it out there and we search. So the role of the brand is really how can we offer support for the consumers to be better educated. And in the case that our product is the one that suits their need, we would be very happy that our product can help the consumer get rid of something that it was either, disturbing him, making them ashamed, or just making their life not be fulfilled at the most. So for me, this experience is very simple. If there is a need from the consumer that is not being met, this is where we want to go. We want to meet the consumer unmet needs in a way that really resolves a problem and make their life better. This is our ultimate goal. And my goal as the CMO of the consumer health business is how can I humanize science? Because if we're very frank, science is not something that has been fashion or trendy. Nobody talks about scientists as people to be influencers, right? So when there is a scientist that goes in camera, everybody thinks that that's new and that's different. Our job is to bring the science. And with COVID, I think everyone has been having a much bigger top of mind of science and trying to understand science and wanting to understand science than ever before. So our job is to make sure that we break it down in a way that is very friendly.
Lovely. So is that, I'm assuming that, there is obviously going to be a big mix to the kind of marketing responsibility and role around that. Are you starting to try and develop personalities, or is this very much about a tone of voice exercise?
It's a complete thing. So we have the personas, but we have the consumer shopper journeys. We have revised the way that we are doing creativity, being much, much more consumer-centric and customer-centric. So when we look at the consumer and its journey, which are the channel, which are the type of communication, what's the tonality, and this also incorporates a high level of risk, because as you were saying before, in this industry, you do not have a really big track of records of things being done in a bit more disruptive way. So actually I think the biggest part of this journey is how we are doing change management in terms of the thinking behind creativity. How do you bring creativity in a way that is still conveys science, because this is extremely strong and it's the fundamental of it, but in an engaging way that people want to continue engage with that brand while also serving them. We just don't want to, we are not in the business of being just entertainment. So this is an interesting one, but the biggest shift is the mentality, because most of the things that we are doing are happening for the first time.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm in the UK, but I'm reasonably certain this is a universal story. And the sort of chief medical officer and, you know, and their team have been far more put to the front recently in the sort of government briefings around the pandemic. And so it strikes me that you're right, you know, certainly science is becoming far more sort of understood and far more popular. But actually, it's curious how the media have grabbed two of them particularly and sort of turned them into slight celebrities, whereas the others that unfortunately just don't have the same degree of charisma or whatever. Haven't. So I'm just curious if you're looking at scientists within Bayer to actually sort of elevate slightly, to, you know, to become spokespeople, to sort of push them out front slightly in the brand.
Well, not at the moment. What we want is to make sure that we highlight how the products can help our consumers. And we want to make sure that we leave all the information on education, on the science, in our websites, our social media. So there's a lot of programs that are happening. And if you follow some of our pages on LinkedIn, you see that we have a series that is fantastic, because we have the daughter of our chief of regulatory breaking down science for kids. So it's not about highlighting or making influence of scientists, but how do we really talk about things that the consumer want to engage with? And let me just give you a simple example. Immunity. There is so many things talked about immunity. It's just vitamin C. How much is of vitamin C? What does zinc does? How can I trust what I find online? And you and I know that if we look at the past 2 decades, the trust of consumers on companies and in brands have decreased tremendously. And then with COVID, suddenly we see an increase again. Why? Because people need the help to navigate, and they need the certainty that what they are looking at in terms of health-related information is true. And this is where I think the brands can play a role more than the scientists. So for example, in immunity, in our case, we have a brand that is called Redoxon, that it was the first brand in the globe to talk about immunity and vitamin C and to put a product out there on vitamin C. Who knew that? Probably no one, because we were too much focused on the science versus focusing on helping consumers to navigate that. And this is the thing that we are changing, really focusing on the brand and in the consumer versus focusing on the bringing the scientists as the influencers, as you say. But it's something that I will keep in mind.
Yeah, no, lovely. No, thank you very much indeed. So in 2020, Bayer launched its first Global Creative Council. What does this involve and what does that mean for the industry?
I'm very excited about that, and thank you for asking. So we put together a fantastic group of people. So we have our strategic partners in communication from our agencies. We have external CMOs like Arantxa, that is the CMO of Waters Danone, or Rupen Desai, that is the CMO of Dole Foods. They come with a vast array of experience, but also we have partners like Google, and we have all our regions there. And the goal is, how do we drive creativity, not just for Bayer, but for the industry? And obviously we want to be there inspiring our, even if it's competition, because we are looking at what's best for the consumer. And for the consumer at the moment, we really need to transform this industry in an industry that people want to engage with, not only when there is a pandemic. So they can be much more holding their health and their decisions in their hands versus just waiting for something bad to happen and then to act. So super excited about that. We tackle there lots of subjects related to creativity and how do we convey the messages in a way that obviously obey to all the regulatory needs. But there is a lot of space still for us as an industry to increase there. So a lot to come. We are in our first year, but very excited with the first meetings.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. And when we talk about creativity, we tend to think externally, what consumers see, campaigns, ads, social engagement, etc. What does creativity look like internally?
Oh, this is an excellent point, because indeed you tend to focus on the things that are out of your control and forget that the inspiration, the enthusiasm, the curiosity has to start internally. So the first thing we did was to make sure that the basics and fundamentals were really well done. And to start with creativity, sometimes people think it's just someone with a great idea and they have a natural talent. These are things that we can't control. The things that we can control is to really do a great job on the fundamentals, briefing, concept, reason to believe, benefits, all the things that are important. We shouldn't leave it aside. We should master them. And sometimes they are the unsexy part, but they go straight into a briefing. And if this first part is not done to this best, you're never going to come with something that is really solving an unmet need. So this is the first thing we did. And then we are really working on engaging the internal employees and the internal public with how creativity can bring things to life. And a couple of things that we have now in the markets that are really getting our teams excited about trying new things. We have Vagina Academy, that is a program to help educate women in Brazil about intimate health that is going to, it's already having fantastic results in a partnership with TikTok. The other thing that we are doing is with Redoxon, we saw that gaming was a really interesting partnership, and we partner with gamers to help them to increase their defenses, not just on the game, but outside of the game. So these are things that when our teams internally are working on, they become our internal ambassadors. So there's nothing more exciting than not just seeing something that is happening outside, but being part of the change. So we give them skills and capabilities. We get them to be on projects that are new, different, where there is a space to fail, and we learn from those failures and we keep moving forward. This is how we are keeping our teams engaged.
And what's the role of marketing in that? Is it kind of an internal marketing role as well? How do you carve out the team's time so that, because one assumes you are, like most marketing teams, there is a degree of target and et cetera, you have to get this, you have to do this, but how do you then say, well, actually, I'm going to take some time out of that and some resource out of that, and I'm going to focus on building these collaborative, creative teams internally?
Well, look, I think it starts with the clarity on the difference between efficiency and efficacy. And when we are talking about the programs for the team, we can keep telling them, okay, so let's make this more efficient. But this doesn't talk about the quality. So we don't separate these projects. What we are talking about is how can you do your job smarter? How can you do your job better? So these programs, because if you put it in a separate way, it's almost like when you have different digital people within the categories, because it sends a subliminal message that everyone else is analog. So creativity is not something that we are putting a separate team. We are telling everyone, we are going to drive this, and you can use creativity as much as innovation in any job. Is a way of thinking, is a way of empathizing with the consumer, is a way of being open to take risks and vulnerable as well. So for us, it's much more of a mindset change than to put teams aside. So we haven't separate teams to do that. So it's within the job of everyone to look at those things.
And Kira, you mentioned earlier when we sort of first talked about, you know, kind of creativity, you used, or two of the words you used were enthusiasm and curiosity. Does this affect then the way that you hire? Are you starting to look for more kind of playful people?
These are the two things that I found when I'm thinking about upcoming talent. These are the first two things that I look at. I don't look at their experience. I have a policy for many years of doing blind CV anyway. So I look for diverse talent, because I think this is how we have the different points coming to the table. I look at how do they see challenges, and this is where enthusiasm came from. And obviously, I'm very keen on having people that are curious enough, but curious with a purpose, because now, you know, it's very easy to be curious now, and you have so much information online, but then you know a little bit of many things and you don't implement anything. So I think curious with the purpose, saying, look, I want to really learn about this, and I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to be thoughtful about my questions. I found this extremely attractive from a talent point of view. When I'm looking at talent, I'm looking at those characteristics. And obviously, this will end up on people that are better for the business. Because if you're more curious and you're enthusiastic, you are not going to give up when a first problem arises. You're going to search for connections. You're going to search for collaboration. That is probably the third thing that comes after these two that we mentioned. So curiosity, enthusiasm, and collaboration. These are the things that, you know, when I'm looking at people, is the first thing that I look at. And then I look at their experience. Then I look at the other things that they have done.
It was a real joy to talk with you. Thank you very much indeed. Have a great rest of the summit, a great rest of the day. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy the event.